Hello. Well, budget workshop week ended a little earlier than expected. Yesterday, the City Commission reached consensus on a tentative millage rate, so the second budget workshop that was scheduled for today was canceled. I've seen a little bit of confusion about what that means, so let's start there. The budget is not finished. What happened yesterday was an important step, but it wasn't the final vote. The Commission set what's called the tentative millage rate. Think of that as the ceiling. Between now and the public budget hearings in September, the city can continue refining the budget and making reductions, adjusting priorities, and answering questions. But the final millage rate can't be higher than the one that was set yesterday without starting the process over. So while the workshop is over, the budget process isn't. And honestly, that's why I wanted to make this series, because budgets can feel really overwhelming. There are hundreds of pages of documents, dozens of different funds, discussions about grants, bonds, reserves, personnel, infrastructure, and projects that may not even begin construction this year. It's a lot. But these decisions affect every single one of us. They affect the roads we drive on, the flooding projects in our neighborhoods, transit, parks, affordable housing, public safety, every service that the city provides. It's our community's priorities written in dollars. And the more people understand what's happening, the better this city works. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to help make these conversations easier to understand so all of us can participate in them. Let's start with the big picture. The proposed fiscal year 27 budget is about 300 million. Now, before anyone hears that number and thinks, wait, what? It's important to understand that this isn't one giant checking account. The city has many different funds, and most of them are legally restricted to specific purposes. The general fund, which pays for many of the day-to-day services that people think about when they think of city government, is about 105 million. Then there are enterprise funds like the marina, stormwater funds, gas tax funds, affordable housing funds, capital improvement funds, transit funds, and many others. One of the improvements I really appreciated this year was the consolidated capital projects list. Commissioner Monica Haskell had previously asked staff to put that together, and I think it makes a tremendous difference. Instead of trying to hunt through dozens of different budget documents, commissioners and residents can now see many of the city's major projects in one place. And that's exactly the kind of transparency that helps people understand where projects stand, how they're being funded, and what the city's long-term priorities are. I'd love to see that continue and become even more detailed in future budgets. So, what was the budget goal this year? The city manager and finance team came into this workshop with a very ambitious goal: present a balanced budget while keeping the tax rate at the rollback rate. You'll hear that phrase a lot during budget season. A rollback rate doesn't mean nobody pays taxes. It doesn't even necessarily mean your individual tax bill stays the same, because taxable values can change. What it means is that the city sets its tax rate to generate roughly the same property tax revenue from existing properties as it collected the year before. In other words, it's an effort to avoid increasing the city's property tax revenue simply because the property values have gone up. That's not an easy thing to accomplish. The city is dealing with contractual wage increases, inflation, higher construction costs, infrastructure needs, and uncertainty about future revenues. So I want to acknowledge the work staff put into bringing forward a budget built around that goal. But here's what really stood out to me. The conversations weren't really about this year. They were about next year. Over and over again, staff and commissioners talked about what could be coming in fiscal year 28. One of the biggest uncertainties is a proposed property tax amendment that will go before voters this November. If it passes, staff estimates the city could lose roughly $700,000 in revenue during the first year, with larger impacts in future years. On top of that, the city expects new debt payments to begin for planned infrastructure bonds. Construction costs remain high. Inflation continues to affect the operating expenses, and many grant-funded projects still depend on funding that hasn't been finalized. So while this budget balances today, everyone acknowledged that the financial picture could become much more challenging over the next few years. That's why there was so much discussion about long-term planning instead of simply getting through one budget cycle. Infrastructure remains a major priority. This is one of the things I was most encouraged to see. The proposed capital plan includes approximately $75 million in projects across multiple funds: stormwater improvements, road and sidewalk projects, seawall repairs, pier rehabilitation, public building improvements, flood resilience projects, parks, the waterfront. Those investments are super important, especially here in District 4, where flooding continues to be one of the issues that residents talk to me most often. Now, it's important to understand something. Just because a project appears in the budget doesn't necessarily mean construction starts tomorrow or even this year. Many of these projects depend on state and federal grants. Some are reimbursement grants, some haven't yet been approved. Others require permitting before work can begin. So the budget tells us what the city hopes to accomplish. It doesn't always tell us exactly when construction will start. That's why I always encourage people to follow projects beyond budget season. One number kept coming up throughout the workshop: personnel. We'll spend an entire episode on staffing because I think it's the single biggest conversation in this budget. But here's why. Personnel costs now represent about 80% of the general fund. Think about that for a minute. Government is a service organization. Police officers, firefighters, public works, code compliance, planning, building inspectors, parks crew, administrative staff, the people who answer the phones, the people who respond after storms, the people who keep the city operating every day. Most of the general fund pays for people. That means the city's long-term financial challenges aren't just accounting challenges. They're conversations about people and the services residents depend on. Those conversations deserve to be handled thoughtfully, transparently, and with compassion. We'll spend a lot more time on that in the next episode. One topic that deserves attention is reserves. Reserve funds don't usually generate headlines, but they matter so much, especially living in the Florida Keys. It means preparing for hurricanes, flooding, and unexpected emergencies. The city's operating reserve policy currently targets between 72 and 92 days, and this proposed budget projects the city at the top of that range. There was also a lengthy discussion about reserves within the city or within the Key West Bite Fund. I'll dedicate an entire episode to that because it's a fascinating conversation about balancing today's needs with preparing for tomorrow's risks. Those kinds of financial decisions may not be super exciting, but they're some of the most important decisions local government makes. My biggest takeaway overall, I came away encouraged by how much work staff put into preparing this budget. Building a proposed budget around the rollback rate while continuing to invest in infrastructure and essential services is no small task. Some of the questions I asked during the workshop weren't answered. I'd still like more detail about proposed personnel changes. I'd like more clarity on the assumptions behind some of the long-term financial projections. I'd like more information about grant timing and project prioritization. And I think residents deserve these answers before the final budget comes back in September. That's not a criticism, it's part of the process. Budgets get better when people ask good questions, and that's exactly what public participation is supposed to look like. In the next episode, we're going to spend some time talking about what I think was the most important conversation of the workshop: personnel. Why labor costs now make up nearly 80% of the general fund. What eliminating 17 vacant positions actually means. Why staff believes attrition alone won't solve the city's long-term financial challenges. How police and fire staffing create unique budget pressures. And the questions I think still need to be answered before any additional personnel reductions are considered. Because behind every position is a person. And behind every staffing decision is a service our community depends on. Thank you for spending a little time with me today. I'll keep reading the documents, keep asking questions, and keep sharing what I learn. Not because I expect everyone to agree with me, but because I believe informed residents make better decisions, ask better questions, and build a stronger Key West together. See you in the next episode.